and welcome to the Washington Farm Bureau Update, a podcast designed to provide the latest agriculture, legislative, and Farm Bureau information. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm Ben Tyndall. Well, today is Friday, February 7th. This is the Policy Committee cutoff. This afternoon, I sat down with the Washington Farm Bureau Government Relations team, Tom Davis and Brie Elsey, to allow them to give a report on the session thus far and what we should be keeping an eye on. Here's what Tom had to say.
So today is the first major cutoff for the legislative session. It's the Policy Committee cutoff. And so if a policy bill isn't out of the legislature by the end of the day today, it's technically dead. Now, we always put air quotes around dead bills because there are many ways to resurrect a dead bill. But in most cases, if a bill hasn't moved out of committee by today, it's dead for consideration this year. Now, there are a number of bills that are moving, both good and bad, and I've got four what we're calling bad bills to share with you. The first is Senate Bill 5981, and this is the cap and trade bill that's been around in the past. And we had an excellent group of Farm Bureau members come and testify against this bill this week. And there's nothing more powerful than to have a farmer come in and talk about the impact legislation will have to their individual farm operation. And these farmers did an excellent job. Now, the good news here is the bill did not move out by today. It is our understanding that they will not move the bill this year, but it'll likely be back next year. So we can at least maybe park that cap and trade notion for this session. Now, House Bill 2550 is a bill that we've talked about in past podcasts. It covers net ecological gain. And as you might remember, that raises the standard for any land use or environmental projects that you might be doing. The current standard is a no net loss, that you can't cause any harm to the environment, but you don't have to increase or improve the overall environmental conditions of the site of your project. Under the original language of this bill, it would have required you to actually increase the environmental conditions on the local site. Now, what happened as the bill was being voted out of committee is they removed the requirements of the bill and turned it into a study so that they will look at what are the impacts, indeed, if we go to a net ecological gain approach for both land use and environmental laws. So we see this as a very good move. We would have preferred the bill just be killed. But if it's going to move along, at least having a look at what are the impacts of such a new environmental standard, we think is just smart governance and will allow us another shot at a conversation about it as they likely will bring it back next year. Senate Bill 6518 is a ban on the pesticide chlorpyrifos, and it passed out of committee this week. We had an excellent panel come speak last week on the bill, and they did an incredible job expressing their concerns over the loss of this chemical, since there is no, in most cases, a workable alternative. There will be ongoing conversations at the Capitol on this bill and finding ways to, if there's a compromise approach that would meet the needs of the bill supporters and also protect farmers looking for alternative chemicals or for expanding the exempted use of chlorpyrifos into the future for the wide number of crops that rely on it. So again, Farm Bureau members provided excellent testimony on this bill and are very thankful for their time in doing that. And the last one I'll share with you is House Bill 2415. This is the bill dealing with special purpose districts, the irrigation districts, diking, drainage, the whole host of special purpose districts. And this is, honestly, it's an urban legislator trying to fix the problems what they perceive to be the problems of these more rural special purpose districts, and doing it with such a heavy-handed manner that it will bankrupt many special purpose districts if this bill became law. And the way it would do that is forcing them to hold the elections for their districts in the general election ballot, which means they would have to pay their cost of that. And that would be, many thousands of dollars that many of these districts simply don't have that. So we're very concerned about that. There's an alternative bill in the Senate that we're hoping it moves in the place of this one, and we'll keep you updated on that as we move forward. Again, thank you for listening, and watch for next week's podcast as we bring you more up-to-date information on what's going on at your state capitol.
Brie then followed up with these comments regarding the low-carbon fuel standard, as well as what we might be expecting in the transportation budget. Here's Bries Report.
On January 29th, low-carbon fuel standard passed off the House floor with 52 votes voting for it and 44 votes voting against it, and 2 folks that were absent or excused. So from what I hear, this bill does not have the votes in the Senate that is needed to keep moving this and to pass it off the Senate floor. So it's likely that low-carbon fuel standard is dead for the remainder of the session, and that is good news. However, this issue is far from over. If you will remember, there was a pending rulemaking for a regional low-carbon fuel standard in Kitsap, Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties. And this was a PISCO rulemaking from the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And really, they were waiting to see if the legislature was going to act on a statewide proposal. And now it looks like that the legislature won't. The PISCA board should be releasing their final rule sometime in the first quarter of 2020. So right now we're waiting to see what happens with that. If that were to pass on a 4-county regional basis, it will likely be met with immediate legal challenge. It's questionable at best whether or not the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency has authority to implement a low-carbon fuel standard. So stay tuned, because although low-carbon fuel standard might be done in the legislature, this issue is far from over. The Senate Democrats just released what they call the Forward Washington Transportation Package proposal. Now, this wouldn't actually be active until next year, but they released the details of the funding mechanisms for this package this year to try to let this percolate throughout the community and to try to get feedback on what's palatable and what's not. So the frightening thing about this package is it contains a proposal for a carbon tax, proposal for a cap and trade program, and also a 6 cents per gallon gas tax increase. But those 3 are just part of 15 different revenue pots that could be included in this package. So it's a quite extensive tax package that would go to fund projects in what's called the Forward Washington package. Another frightening thing about this package is, if you will remember in the Connecting Washington package, which is a previous transportation package, it had what we call a poison pill. And in that, a poison pill kills a proposal in some capacity. Well, in Connecting Washington, that poison pill killed low-carbon fuel standard. And the rumor right now is that the Forward Washington package will not have a poison pill. It will not contain language that kills a low-carbon fuel standard. So in addition to the tax increases that we might see in this transportation package, it also leaves room for a low-carbon fuel standard as a standalone bill. And if you'll remember, the low-carbon fuel standard had increases up to 57 cents a gallon for gasoline and up to 63 cents a gallon for diesel. Another thing to note, that although the tax increases for this transportation package wouldn't go into effect until next year, this year is an election season. So remember that although these tax increases won't pass this year, remember that they plan to pass them right after they're reelected.
Tom, Brie, thank you for the hard work that you're putting in this session. We really appreciate the advocacy that you're showing for farmers and ranchers within our state. One of the bills that was mentioned was SB 5981, implementing a greenhouse gas emissions cap and trade program. The bill received a public hearing on Tuesday, February 4th, in the Senate Committee on Environment, Energy, and Technology. The chair of that committee, who was also the sponsor of the bill, Senator Carlyle, started the public hearing with some opening statements.
I want to note that comprehensive legislation takes multiple years. I think everyone knows that. We've had dialogue for a couple of years about different types of pricing of carbon. We've also had conversations around deep decarbonization within various sectors. I think last year we showed that we can do a deep decarbonization within the electricity sector very successfully. An economy-wide approach requires a pricing mechanism, and this is to sort of elevate the civic dialogue, the policy dialogue about different options. And there's a lot of voices in terms of thought leadership from the environmental community, from the climate activist folks, as well as industry and a number of sectors.
The senator then goes on to share a brief story that I think was intended to be comforting, but in actuality, it was incredibly unsettling.
I also went down to Sacramento last summer and met with a number of folks, including the CARB board, the board that oversees their program. And, they told me one story that I want to relay to our folks here, which was the folks at the CARB board said, in effect, sort of figuratively, that they have the administrative authority under their statute to sign a piece of paper tomorrow that would close the 7 concrete manufacturing plants in California that remain. And she said, we could do that because they're large emitters. And of course, ultimately, you'd have a scenario where a coal-fired plant in China would manufacture that type of infrastructure. It would be shipped across the largest ocean on the planet, and it would be unloaded at the docks in California to take care of buildings and highways and bridges and roads. And what would be the purpose of that? And so instead, they choose to allow them to be eligible for offsets.
So the senator shares this story that the California CARB board has the authority right now, with the stroke of a pen, to close down an entire industry within the state. Of course, they wouldn't do that, but they could at any time. They won't, but they could. I'm thinking that Senator Carlyle shared that story to communicate to the public that if, granted the senator would likely say when, but if the authority, security, and responsibility that you currently have over your farm or dairy or ranch or industry, if that authority is handed over to the state government by means of fully regulating your carbon emissions to the extent that it is in California or beyond, I think that the senator wants us as citizens to have peace of mind, knowing that the government bureaucracy will regulate us and use that authority benevolently and wisely in the best interest of the state. The Washington Farm Bureau Policy Manual states directly, we oppose connecting energy policy to climate mandates. And that's certainly what this legislation is doing. Our policy manual continues with this statement: we believe that climate change is a natural occurrence. Focusing on greenhouse gas emissions, especially carbon, does not address the impacts of natural climate variability, nor does it recognize the fact that carbon dioxide is a key component of agricultural productivity and efforts to provide sufficient food to feed the world and reduce world hunger. We oppose any cap and trade program or carbon tax, period. Now, as Tom mentioned, this bill in particular is likely not going to be moving forward this session. But as Senator Carlyle alluded to, this is an ongoing effort to see our state eventually enter into some sort of cap and trade program. We were very honored to have 4 farmers come out to Olympia on Tuesday, representing the Farm Bureau's position and standing in opposition to this legislation. Their testimony was very powerful, and I don't think I'm overstating it by saying it was moving. Here's some of that testimony.
My name is Burr Mosby. I'm a farmer, and I'm slowly being put out of business. We get one crop a year. California gets 2.33 crops a year. We put 500 hours on our tractors a season. They put 1,800 hours on their tractors. They get to farm almost year round. We do not. They flood our market with cheap product when it's our prime time, then hike the prices up when availability is scarce. We operate without carbon sequestration credits. When you put my farm out of business, who will steward my land? Who will maintain habitat, donate food to the food banks, and supply local produce to our region, not to mention employment? Our labor loan has gone up $4.03 in the past 5 years. Our product has risen 50 cents to $1, with our organic products going down 10%. We're being squeezed on all levels. I'm proud to grow safe, local, healthy food. Don't punish the Washington farmer for doing good work. We've been sequestering carbon for centuries, and we didn't talk about it until you people started talking about it.
Everyone in our farm is working as a team to help the farm break even. We can barely afford to maintain the equipment on our farms on our own rights. How do you think we can afford a Tier 4, Tier 5, or eventually a Tier 6 equipment which doesn't last as long? Electric tractors and trucks to meet the needs of our farm do not exist. I wonder if you have considered the environmental impact of destroying available equipment for the sake of replacing it, or the additional maintenance that the Tier 4 tractors require. If I decide to go on my own as a farmer, I would depend on the older equipment because there wouldn't be any way I could afford what this cap and trade bill would require. You would hurt my co-workers the most who drive many miles to come to work because housing in South King County is expensive. In addition to their living expense, not only hurts my young family, but the people who are putting food on your table. The collective carve-in legislation bill includes 1% tax on bicycles that I will purchase for my small children in the future. When does this end?
Thank you for being concerned about our natural resources and the environment. Farmers and ranchers have a legacy of that concern, and more importantly, by the voters. They are steadfast. In spite of their position, the governor keeps pressing his agenda. Just say no. Farmers are already doing their part and are at a clear disadvantage when it comes to higher taxes and regulations. Before we ever put a seed in the ground, harvest a blueberry, or sell a plant at our nursery, every single element of our ag business will be that much more expensive to operate under this bill and others like it. We're already under the load of the highest minimum wage in the nation. Please don't further burden our citizens with this additional tax that only sends our money to the state with no measurable benefit.
At my peak, I was farming around 1,500 acres. Today, I farm about 150, and I can't make a profit. Across the nation, farm bankruptcies are up about 19%, and it's because we as farmers, we are price takers, we aren't price setters. So every time we have some sort of additional costs coming upon us, we can't turn around and add that on like many other industries can. I have two friends, and they farm in Skagit County. And one of them came to me last week, him and his son, and they said, I can't do this any longer. I'm not farming. I'm going to quit because the costs keep rising. And I've gone to my buyers, my customers, and asked them if they would pay for an increase. And they said, no, we will go somewhere else if you can't continue to produce the crops you're growing for us without an increase. A second farmer, the same way, went to the customer said no. So now they are cutting their acres, reducing their crop profile, reducing their diversification, and therefore it's going to make farm communities such as ours and other farm communities across this state feel the impact of anything that you do that raises the cost. I urge you to please vote no.
As always, we greatly appreciate our members that come to Olympia to speak out and stand up for agriculture. It is certainly needed. Well, I think that wraps us up for this week. The WFB Update is a production of the Washington Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture in Washington State, ensuring our family farms continue to feed the world. To learn more, visit our website at www.wsfb.com.